Okay, we're back on the RCA radio. I've replaced the 12SQ7 tube as well as installed a 50L6 in place of the 35L6. I decided to go ahead and put the hacked up speaker back in the radio because of the field coil, and the reason I did that is because with the resistor we had a little bit more filter hum, and that's because a resistor doesn't have the reactance that a inductor has, of course, so therefore it doesn't block the ripple as effectively as an inductor. Now I could have gotten around that by increasing the values of the filter capacitors, but if I increased them too high, that could have exceeded the surge current limit of the 35Z5 rectifier tube. And I could have gotten around that by adding a surge resistor, but that would have been just something else I would have had to have added to the chassis. So I went ahead and just put the old speaker back in and connected the field coil, and now we're back like we were. I also touched up the alignment a little bit. It was off. And the radio is now a little more sensitive, but now we have another little issue. You hear what it's doing on weaker stations?
It is what it is. Service and repair on all starters and alternators, including the Oats ATV.
You hear all that motor boating and oscillation is taking place between stations.
3 others and make it a 4-person team, but if we want your whole...
So now I look around and the parents are all just...
But as you can hear with the volume down, there's absolutely no filter hum. And solving this problem, this oscillation problem, might be a little bit tricky. Now looking on the schematic, tells me that there are a couple of 120 picofarad mica capacitors inside of the second IF transformer. Now those normally don't fail, but from time to time they can become leaky. So I think that's going to be the next order of business, is to pull this IF transformer apart and check the mica capacitors inside and see if those are a problem. Pretty much when you have a radio doing this, it's pretty much trial and error experimentation to try to find out what's causing it. It could be lead dress, it could be any number of things. I mean, it's acceptable on local stations, but I'd like to get all that extra motorboating and oscillation to go away for pulling in distant stations. Okay, I tried to pull the IF transformer apart and it was wanting to be cantankerous, but I did get a glimpse up inside of it, and it appears the capacitors are embedded in the IF transformer. They're not separate components. So rather than risk tearing anything up at this point, I remounted the IF transformer, and we'll check some other possibilities, and I'll go back to the IF transformer as a last resort. But right now, let's deal with this switch here. I can tell that this is not original. I actually found the model of radio this came out of, a model 55X, I believe, which only had a volume control and tuning knob. This switch was added for the phono position, and you can see this piece of paper that someone shoved down in here to keep the switch terminals from shorting out to the metal volume control case. So that's definitely an add-on. That didn't come that way, but for right now I'm going to pull it out and try to fix it up a little bit neater than what it is. Okay, I have everything torn apart in preparations to make this look a little neater. You can see I've already ran heat shrink tubing over the leads here, over one of the leads. Maybe then we won't have to ram a piece of paper or cardboard down in there to insulate the switch. And I can clearly see that this hole doesn't appear to be a factory drilled hole. That looks like something they did in the conversion. And one thing I'm going to do, this is actually two switches in one. And before, even when the switch was set to phono position, there was still some if you will, leakage of radio signals passing through, and we really don't want that. So the way I'm gonna combat that problem, and the way other manufacturers took care of that problem, was to have the B+ voltage that feeds the converter stage connected to the other side of the switch. So when I switch it to phono, it removes the B+ voltage from the converter stage, thus killing any possibility of radio reception, and then nothing will leak through on the phono position. Okay, we've done some more work on the radio. This terminal strip here contains the AVC components and has the audio output for the radio going to this side of the radio phono switch. The center of the radio phono switch goes to our audio input of the volume control, and the other side of the radio phono switch goes up to our phono input terminal strip, that being the positive, this being the negative. And the dimwit that modified this before had the negative side of the phono input going straight to the hot chassis, and since the negative side is also grounded to the record changer chassis, that makes the record changer hot. So I used a 0.047 microfarad isolation capacitor to help minimize the shock hazard there. You'll still get a shock hazard under the right, or you'll still receive an electrical shock under the right conditions, but it won't be as bad as if it was connected directly to the chassis. Also, on the other side of the radio phono switch, this is actually two switches in one. I have the B+ voltage going to the mixer tube to where when you switch it to phono, it kills the B+ voltage. Before, when we switched it to phono, we still could hear a little bit of radio reception, and that's really undesirable. Looking at the schematic, you see the B+ going up into the first IF transformer, which also goes to the grid, one of the grids of the mixer tube. Coming out of the IF transformer goes up to the plate. By inserting our B+ kill switch right here, if you will, when you switch it to phono, there's no B+ voltage going up through here, thus killing the converter tube. So when you switch it to phono, you have no radio reception. Phono, radio, and I still need to work on this switch. The contacts are not wanting to make the best connection. Now we're in phono, so you can hear we're passing a signal there. Okay, back on the radio. That's turning in to be the radio from hell. I've installed a phono cable to plug into the record changer. Also installed a power cable for the record changer, and it's pluggable, so I can separate the record changer from the rest of the radio chassis. Well, then I put everything back together and turned it on, and guess what? No audio whatsoever. And I noticed the dial bulb getting a little brighter than it should have. So I said, well, that's not a good sign. Something sounds like it may be shorted. Well, sure enough, it was. I checked our resistance between this connection here, which is the B+, where it branches off into the various sections of the radio. I checked between this connection and ground, and guess what? Had a dead short. The only thing that was keeping the rectifier tube and the dial lamp from totally burning up was the field coil. Had I left the resistor in place, the resistor would have just fried. Okay, so what branch coming off of here is shorted? So I started removing wires, and guess what? The short is somehow in this switch here. Somehow or another, I don't know how it's happening, but our B+ input to the switch is somehow shorting to the chassis. So I took the switch out, played with it, put it back in, short went away, radio played a while, I unplugged it, plugged it back in a few minutes later, the short was back again. So now it looks like I'm going to have to take this switch apart, and it just really irritates me because after I've already ran heat shrink tubing over everything and got it nice and neat like I wanted, and then Murphy decides to rear his ugly head. So now I'm going to have to see what I can do about this switch problem. I don't know why it's shorting out. So I guess I'm just going to have to try to take the switch apart and find out. But anyway, we're running short of time on this video, so I guess we'll do that in the next part. You know, I really should have been a TV producer, because that's what they do on two-part TV shows. They get you right to the good part, and then they make you wait till next week to see the rest of it. Well, I'll try not to leave you hanging that long, but we are out of time, and say goodbye and more to come later. Okay, so I won't make you wait. I hope I've solved the problem, but I used a little piece of cardboard for an insulator between the switch and the chassis, and I hope that solves our issue. I couldn't find any reason with the switch to cause the issue that we were having, so the only thing I know to do is try the insulator, and the radio is now working.
Got a question. Do I hate people are losing their job? Yeah. Do I hate that it's
phono, radio, phono, radio, phono, radio. And we're passing a signal on phono mode.
Where do we
so let's hope and pray this little issue is solved.
We find ourselves with a
okay, hopefully one more video and we can wrap up the problems with the radio
who's going to come
and move on to the record changer. And it looks like I'm going to have to replace more wire, because as I was removing the function switch to correct its fault, I accidentally hit a couple of these wires and the rubber insulation just flaked right off.